Good morning and welcome to Indic Academy. We are very privileged to meet Sri Surendranath ji, author of Templexity. So please could you tell us the range of the book? I think you have 13 chapters and you have covered several dynasties. So in a brief.
Initially, it was planned to be a book with the title The Forgotten Dynasties, which had 13 chapters. But as the days progressed and as the research intensified, I realized that the narrative has to be little more interesting and absorbing. So I decided a different format, and actually I gave up my first version of the book and started working on a revised version which now has 5 chapters. As during the human evolution over the next last 10,000 years is what I tried to cover in my introduction. And then all the engineering aspects related to temple building, etc., covered it in sacred science and engineering. The third chapter is architectural styles and stylistics. More often, we talk more about architecture itself as a concept and as a subject, but little do we pay attention on the finer aspects of it. The finer aspects of it is, I call it stylistics. So, architectural styles and stylistics is a very intense subject that I've tried to cover in very detail. Try to compare the features that exist in each of the architectures. There are 11 different architectural styles that exist in the geography that I have chosen. And then comes gallery. The gallery chapter is about organizing the temples in the form of circuits so that a potential traveler knows exactly where to start a travel plan and where to end. The idea is also positioning the temples in that particular circuit in a specific sequence so that one can observe the evolutionary aspects of how the temples actually evolved in that particular circuit. So if you compare first to second, you'll actually know what improvement has happened from an engineering side, from an artistic side. For example, when you take this perspective of comparing it within each circuit, you will realize that in 12th and 13th centuries, till 12th century, the challenge was to grow as tall as possible. So we grew taller and taller. So the peak was Konark Temple, 13th century. They reached a height of something like 220 feet. That's amazing for a sandstone structure like that. And then all the temples that were built later on focused more on compaction, and they gave up the height concept. Brihadeshwara and Konark and all of them stand tall, literally stand tall from a height point of view. But all temples that were built after that focus more on compaction. I'll give you an example of compaction. If you look at Halebid or Belur or Somnathpur, the Hoysala temples, they try to achieve very high degree of sculptural space given the constraint of length and breadth. Normally, in a 40 feet by 50 feet, the perimeter is something like 180 feet. So 180 feet is, and then the height is there in approximately 10 to 12 feet. So that is the area that you get for your sculptural activity. But beginning with Hoysala, they started this concept of stellate plan, where they start with a rectangle and then they turn this rectangle by 45 degrees and then turn it once again another 45 degrees, and all the four edges or dots are connected to form what is called a stellate plan. Using this technique of stellate plan under the constraints of length and breadth, in Somnathpura temple, 40 by 50 feet, they achieved a sculptural space of 1.2 kilometers. So, in 13th century, this transition happened. So, all these finer aspects in terms of the finer engineering nuances were something that were captured in this particular chapter called Architectural Styles and Stylistics. In engineering, sacred science and engineering, of course, I covered up to 64 different engineering aspects in terms of positioning, in terms of polish. The Virupaksha temple in Padadakal has a bull sitting before Shiva, and the shine, I think, is as original as it can be. Even after a good 1,000 plus years, the shine is so much, you can't believe what kind of technique they used. So all these finer aspects of polish and stellate plans, compaction. One more interesting thing. Even today, I'm not, despite all the research, I'm not able to visualize how they managed to drill a curved hole in Halebe. I can't imagine what. So the ingenuity lies in not using the toolkits that were available. The ingenuity lies in creating toolkits so that they can realize a feature. That's the most fascinating thing, that most fascinating subject that I was really attracted to. So I covered all these fascinating subjects in this chapter called Sacred Science and Engineering of Architectural Styles and Stylistics. We simply say North Indian Nagara architecture and South Indian Dravida architecture, not realizing the finer differences of the sculptural activity and then the sculptor's signature. The signature work is what I try to bring out in architectural styles and stylistics. It's not what brings them together, what separates them was my motive. So, all those aspects in very detail. Gallery, there are 21 circuits. I presented all the temples in the form of circuits. So, once you go to a particular place, what are the temples you can cover? What are the evolutionary aspects you can cover within that circuit? So, one is the completeness part of it, and so evolutionary part of it, and three is what kind of refinement that came about as it evolved, say 200 years. Each of the circuits will have something like 200 to 250 years of history. Some in some cases like Hoysala, it's about 300 years of history. So in the 300 years, how the temples actually evolved, and that also is reflection of how societies actually uh, thought creatively in terms of use of space, in terms of generating toolkits, in terms of embedding the science, the knowledge of science that they had. For example, there is an idea called zenithal tube. A zenithal tube is a tall structure where the light falls on the sanctum sanctorum only once in a year. So it's designed in such a way that light falls only on one. And then we have solstice, we have equinox. There are so many astronomical concepts that are deeply embedded within these temples. So, in nutshell, the gallery chapter gives you a wonderful view of how our medieval societies actually evolved. The last chapter is the most interesting. I think the book is all about the last chapter. I titled it as Art Thematics. My firm belief, after 10 years of intense research and travel and study, of course, reveals that temples actually had very little to do with faith. It had a temple was a place where they could showcase every facet of their lives that they felt proud of, even if it means showcasing their dressing sense, even if it means showcasing the engineering knowledge, the architectural knowledge, the astronomical knowledge, and including vanity. There are more than 100 vanity items that I am able to decode from the temple sculpture. So I would say, in conclusion, a temple reflects almost every facet of the societies that built them, and that's what the title justifies. Templexity is all about complexities of the temple other than faith. So I'm very sure you'll find it interesting. Please do read.
Thank you. Can I ask you one question? Where is the what visible indication we have of human emotion, an expression of
Fantastic,
emotion?
fantastic. Very good question, because this question came to my mind while I was doing my research. And then there is one specific chapter within the art thematics. I called it women in sculpture. As a matter of fact, there is nothing called men in sculpture. It's all about women. So the women in sculpture, when I was traveling to, when I was studying Konark Temple in detail, I was able to see that every sculpture where they portrayed a woman had a very distinct emotion. So much so that I pulled out the faces of all the women and created a catalog. And I would say it is emoticons of emojis of 12th century. And there are 64 different smiles that I was able to decode from. That itself is a wonderful reflection of the emotion that our medieval society wanted to portray. It obviously tells me that the society in general was a very happy society. The kind of smiles. You'll be amazed at my collage that I made out of 64 different smiles from Konark.
Thank you, and hoping for a longer conversation.